Hi, everyone. Welcome to 21st Century Saints, our podcast and live stream series for members, those affiliated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm going to ask if we could get the rest of our co-hosts for tonight, if you guys could mute for the moment. So for our audience, we're having a little bit of audio technical stuff tonight, and since I am completely inept at fixing it properly, the only way we can do it is to mute. So we'll try and be. Hopefully, this will make us more well behaved, right, Sarah? I think there's probably going to be real benefits to this. But for the moment, again, let me just welcome you all to 21st Century Saints. So yeah, we are a podcast and live stream series for members and those who are affiliated with or adjacent to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints here in the United Kingdom and around the world. It is great to have you all with us, and we hope you all have had a wonderful Easter time if you have celebrated that. I have in the studio with me tonight, I'm going to introduce our two almost newbies because one of them's been here a couple of times before. But Sarah, do you wanna say hey? And you'll need to unmute before you say hey. This is new. This is uncharted territory.
It's uncharted. I'm not used to muting myself on a podcast. I'm not used to muting myself in life in general, but there we go. Anyway, yeah, good evening, everybody. It's good to be here yet again. We've just all had Easter, we've had General Conference, so there's been a lot going on for all of us, and we've probably all got lots of thoughts, lots of feelings, lots of things going on after the weekend that we've just enjoyed. So we're here tonight to talk a lot more about some of these things, about how we can all build bridges, but we discuss that and we talk about that as we go on.
Yeah, so before we kick off, just if you're joining us tonight for the first time, we are the people who podcast here. I think Ruth Heath, who's with us in the comments, is the most slick, and I know that you're not going to love me saying that, Ruth, but it's true, you are. The rest of us here occasionally have grandchildren coming in to ask where the snacks are. I sometimes have to go and leave because a child starts screaming, and this is the podcast that we that we have. We are little bit rough and ready. This is our life. We podcast from our kitchens, our bedrooms, our from our living rooms with a kid around somewhere, or quite often a husky who's been very vocal recently. Hopefully, they're all going to be nice and quiet tonight, and they're going to be very well behaved too. So yeah, just wanted you all to keep that in mind. If we do have any problems, we will try to fix them as quick as we possibly can. But welcome into our world in the meantime, where hopefully we talk about the things that we, for whatever reason, aren't maybe feeling empowered or able to talk about in church. Sometimes that reason is that people want to go and just feel uplifted and not have to worry about maybe things that the person next to them is bringing with them. Sometimes we're just all in different places and have different needs in church. Um, I am one of those people who likes to talk about the stuff that's going on here, and the UK has been having a really, really tough time. So we approach this conversation with humility, with love, and seeking to understand what someone, what someone has learned. What could we learn from the experiences of the people that we're chatting with tonight? So before we kick off, Sarah, do we have any announcements that we want to just quickly shout out before we begin?
Yeah, I think next week, our podcast next Wednesday evening is going to be an absolute treat because the darling Ruth Heath is going to be co-hosting with me as we interview Jane. Jane is very used to sitting on this microphone in this podcast and asking questions. And next week, we're turning the tables around and we are asking Jane the questions. So, with that in mind, if any of you have got any questions you want us to put to the lovely Jane, let us know and we will put the questions that seem good ones, we will put those to Jane. I think if you can hit like and subscribe, that helps us enormously. It gets the word out there, it gets more people engaged in these really important discussions around Mormonism that we need to be having today. So hit like, hit subscribe, and let's get the debate going. The other thing is I just want to acknowledge and just comment on the work that we're doing on safeguarding. We're still having fabulous conversations with our leaders. We're still having great engagement with the leaders around safeguarding and how we can move this forward in the church and how we can get to a position of genuine excellence and a good standard of safeguarding in the UK. It comes with challenges, it comes with persistence on our part, but we're having the discussions. I just want to pay tribute and thank you to everyone who has contacted us, who shared their experiences of abuse, who shared their experiences of difficult conversations with leaders around managing abuse, people who have filled in our survey. That is giving us a lot of information that is helping us to go to leaders and say, this is a need that we're seeing, and this is why we are asking you to act in this particular way. So thank you for that. And just a total reassurance. I know we say this every time, but I don't think we can say it enough. We absolutely honour your confidentiality. There will never come a time that we will breach any of the confidentiality or trust that you have placed in us. We will honour that. We will keep that close to our hearts. But thank you for those that have shared. And please know that we are not at any point, because and I say this because it has been raised, we are not about trying to encourage or nag anybody to come back to church. A couple of people have said, I just don't want you to talk me into coming back to church. We're not going to do that. The invitation for discussion is there, but we promise we are not about to say you've got to get back and sit in the pew on Sunday. We will honour and respect the paths and decisions that you have made. But thank you for sharing with us. It's enabling us to make the church a safer place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sarah. I reiterate that, yeah. When it comes to speaking with us, you get to talk, we get to learn as we listen. So thank you so much. Okay, so Sarah and I are going to probably go a little bit quiet for the next little while. I would like to, first of all, introduce our guest host for tonight, who is the wonderful Deborah Squires-Coleman, who has been doing incredible work, not just in her life, because you're someone who I find extremely inspirational, um, but also in the church. Very early on, when I think Sunstone UK hadn't long kind of been happening online, and I'd sort of become aware of some of the work that you were doing to address what I believed were some of the um, difficulties that we were facing, some of the challenges that we face here in the UK. Um, I was fascinated not only by your approach, but the fact that you seem to bring people together, and really look at the why are we facing these issues, and the listening part. I think I don't know if I've seen it happen anywhere, never mind just in the UK, like I've seen how your ministry has looked. So before we introduce our special guest tonight, Debbie, would you talk a little bit about what your background is, what you're seeing in the UK, and why this is an important subject to you?
Um, yeah, good evening, everybody. I haven't got really a lot to say to myself. It's pretty boring, really. But I joined the church in '76 in Romford Stake. Moved about a little bit, but Romford Stake is my home. It's the amazing stake, just lovely people, lovely leaders, and I'm honoured to be numbered among them. I'm on the Relief Society presidency, on the State Relief Society presidency, and it's a lovely place to be because I can, in the early days, I was able to organise some firesides and Zoom meetings with really inspirational people. And I feel that because I had 5 children, I didn't really have a lot of time to do anything. So it's only when I got in my 60s, I thought, oh, no, I could do something now. I can see who I am. And I started to realise and think about my faith and where I stood with my faith. So my feet are firmly planted in the LDS church. But I see things in colour. And so it's very interesting. And some days are better than others. And it's been a joy actually to be asked to come and co-host this podcast because the first time I heard of David was when I read his book, Bridges. And I thought, oh, blow, I better read that again just to catch up with, because it was of great help to me. But then when I opened it, I realised that everything was annotated. Every page had something written on it. So I thought, I don't have to read it again. I just read what I felt about it and how it made me feel at that time. So that was pretty good. And I was very grateful to learn from the book. And I think that's part of my life now, really, is just soaking everything up and just learning from other people. So with that, I'd like to hand over to David, and maybe he can tell us a bit about himself.
Hello, everyone. I'm not really good about talking about myself. I'm kind of a shy guy. I live in Washington, D.C. I have 6 kids. As you can see, I've got a lot of gray hair. I had foot surgery about 6 weeks ago, and so I couldn't shower. And so all of a sudden I started having gray hair on my face. So this beard is a new development, and we'll see whether it lasts into the summertime. I've served in a lot of different church leadership roles, and lived for a short time in London doing business. I've lived in India, I've lived in West Africa, I've lived in Japan, and in probably a dozen states in the United States. So I've seen a lot of the world, and although we say that the church is the same everywhere, the church is different everywhere too. And there's a lot that's in common, but there's also a lot of variation. And people have different lives, and they live in the church in that difference. And I've learned and grown in each place in which I've lived. And so much of that has come from being a member of the church and participating with people who, although we may have common beliefs, have often very different lives. So I'm not sure that's a good introduction. Is that enough?
Yeah, sorry, Debbie.
Whatever you feel, we're probably... Am I still muted? Am I okay now?
You're good.
So yeah, whatever's, that's good, and maybe we'll learn more of you as we go on and the conversation flows. So actually, one of my questions is I see you obviously as a bridge builder yourself, and do you think your background or your early years set you up to be a bridge builder?
You know, I've wondered about that. I think we're shaped a lot by the world we live in. I think me living in a lot of different places has helped me understand that I don't have all the answers. It's easy to think you have them all, and then you go someplace like London and realize that my background doesn't allow me to completely understand everything that goes on and in the business world that I was immersed in. When I moved to India, I clearly recognized that there's so much that I didn't know. And I think whether it's the nature of my career, which was in kind of business analytics, or whether it was living in a lot of different places, I learned over time that the best thing to do was to ask questions and listen, to try and understand people with where they're coming from. And if I can suspend my judgment about what is the right business solution or the right decision that someone should make for their life or the right way to live in a culture in a country, that I learned a tremendous amount about myself and about others. And I think that's the essence of bridge building, is to kind of suspend our judgment and to be able to honor that other people have just as legitimate of feelings and beliefs as I do. And that if I want to have a relationship with them, I need to try and understand them. And the best way to do that is to ask them questions and to listen to them express who they are and why they are the way they are.
Thank you, David. So kind of going into that is really interesting because I think that's where I started when I was first called to the stake, is to enable people to tell their stories, because I felt that in listening to the stories, that's where the connection comes. So the difficulty I found sometimes is that people, if you don't, we are taught, we're getting better now, but traditionally, if a story hasn't been faith promoting, it's not really been listened to. And I noticed that in your book, you talked about listening to stories and listening to difficult things. How do you think listening to difficult things helps us as a people to connect and build bridges to each other? And is it possible? Is it something we need to learn to do better?
Well, I think if we could do it better, we would find that we would be a place where more people feel like they could belong. One of the scriptures that has become more and more meaningful to me over time is the scripture where this group of people leave and go into the wilderness and get baptized by Alma at the waters of Nunu. And they make a promise that they will mourn with each other and comfort each other. And that is a part of their baptismal commitment, if you will. And they make commitment to the group. They make a commitment to each other. And I don't know how you can mourn with someone if you don't know what they're feeling. And I don't know how you can comfort someone if you're not into the story and the nature of what they're feeling. And that means that we have to kind of suspend our fear of listening to someone share the challenges of faith, the challenges of affiliation with a religious organization. And we need to give them kind of a place where they can be authentic with us and they can trust us with those stories, because we can't really love them, mourn with them, comfort them, be connected with them unless we do that. So I think it's a risk to jump in there, but I think it's a risk worth taking.
Yeah, could I just jump in a couple of the comments that are mentioning this too? And just to remind you, Debbie, could you mute between, that's perfect now. While you're, and I'd like to hear you continue, David, but I'd also like both of you maybe to speak a little bit to this also. I don't know that there's anyone that I've ever met, not just in the church, but in life, who thinks I am not a good listener or I am a very judgmental person. It's very sort of few and far between. And I think most members of the church would agree that they're certainly trying to listen, they're trying to be non-judgmental, but often there's a disconnect there. Because people are saying that they can feel not listened to and they can feel judged. Debbie, you had mentioned connection. That word really interests me. So how can people? How do we know? I mean, we think we're listening. How can we tell that we actually need to do more listening? Does that make sense? Yeah, if you would continue, David, that would be great.
So I think we can tell if we're listening if all of our statements end with a question mark. So if we're asking questions, then we're listening. Well, that's not completely true either. But if we don't have question marks, then we're really just speaking to someone. So there has to be something that goes on in our mind that has a level of curiosity, a level of interest, expressing dignity to the other person, holding them in respect, so that we really want to understand what they are saying. We also can kind of measure it. So if we are talking what we think is 50% of the time, then we're really probably talking 70% of the time, which means that we really aren't listening. So we need to pause. We need to ask questions. We need to be genuinely curious. We need to really try and understand what the other person is saying. We need to not formulate a response in our mind to what they're saying, but we need to kind of immerse ourselves into what it is they're feeling and trying to understand why.
What about you, Debbie? Tell me your thoughts about listening.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I also think as church members, sometimes we are brought up to think that we can fix things. So when we're listening to somebody, part of our hearing is, how can we make this better? What can we do for this person to make it right? And I sometimes think that we confuse being ministers with being saviours, and we can't always save. We can support people and sit with them and just totally listening, but we have to stop trying to fix things, because we can't, and that takes us away from sometimes from sitting and just mourning with someone, just being there as a listening ear. So I think as ministers, sometimes we want to fix it too much, even stuff that we have not the capability of fixing. We we want to do it. It's our natural instincts, but it's not always useful to think that way.
Do you want to go on with some more questions for Brother David?
Jane, can I just ask, or just
Yeah,
offer one more thing on this?
Yeah.
I think it's a skill. I think listening isn't something we're endowed with. I think it's something we have to develop. And I think for many of us, particularly if we're older and we're parents, we've learned to not listen. We've learned to tell people what to do. We've learned to tell people how they should live their lives. And I think we have to go to school in some way and learn how to listen again. And I have had to repent a lot. As a church leader, I don't think I was a good listener. I think I was a good person to try and think of the scripture or the assignment that would help someone get back in line or strengthen their faith, as opposed to just sit there in silence while they are telling me what is important to them, and creating the environment for them to trust me with what it is that they want to say. So I think it's work. I think we have to accept that it's work, and we have to practice and try it and learn it.
Yeah, I agree with you, David. I was talking to my daughter yesterday, who stepped away from the church a few years ago, and I was asking her, what are some of the things that could be done better to help people who still attend and those who don't, to come together, or even not part. Sometimes we find that when somebody steps away from the church, all contact is lost, which is really sad, because I would hope we were brothers and sisters first, And she said that she would hope that people would be accepting of her choice, not to take it as a personal affront, but just to be accepting of that, and to just listen to her reasoning, not really to always have to agree, but to just listen to how she feels. And she felt that was very important. She also mentioned that sometimes, out of love, because we do love each other, there's a strong bond and a strong love. But when people step away, sometimes we say things that are harmful to them. Have you got any advice, David, on the kind of things that would would bring us together, the kind of wording that would bring us together instead of pushing us apart. You know, we know we should say loving things, but sometimes loving things come across as hard and unwanted.
Yeah, so one is, I think we have to dignify agency and respect people's choices. So we just have to accept that whether it's your daughter or my daughter, they get to choose how to live their life. We fought for that in the pre-existence. We want that in them. We want them to be able to make choice. So we can't diminish them when they take that agency and make a choice that we have not chosen to do. We also need to use words that draw us together as opposed to push us apart. I don't know what words we use in the UK to label people that leave the church, but I just used one, leave the church. I know members who leave the church and are called apostates, who are called tares, who are called deceived. We use words to separate them as opposed to bring them together. I like to use words like people who believe differently, or people who don't believe everything that I do. Or I guess that's just people, because no one believes everything that I do. So anything that we can do that creates inclusive language, that doesn't create outgrouping, that doesn't vilify, that doesn't extend labels that are reductive or harmful. Those are the sorts of things that I think create trust with someone who doesn't believe like they used to, who doesn't participate at church. So that's kind of a first glance at it.
Thank you for that, David. That is so true. We do call people apostates, and even sometimes the word inactive triggers me a little bit. I suppose that's why I use the word stepping away, because even I don't like that totally, but it just means to me that they've just stepped away, and it could be forever, it could be for a little time, it could be, you know, however long they need, but it's just. But then even in my heart, I'm thinking, they might have stepped away from the church, but I don't want them to step away from me. I want us to keep that connection. So I think any words we use, we have to really be careful of and thinking. And I think that's what a great thing, like I'm learning from the younger generation, is that words are so important. You know, a lot of people say, oh, you're being too woke, or you're too worried about this, but for me, words are so important, and I think they're really, really important, how we communicate with each other. So
Debbie, can I
quite
make
a few years ago, before, yes, you go on.
Okay. No, I just wanted to make a quick comment to say that the language, the way we speak to people is so incredibly important. And I had an experience literally a few weeks ago when I was with a group of friends, that people that I know from church and various things going on. I was with this group of people, and a woman who was with us, who was kind of an elderly woman in her 80s, made the comment that she doesn't understand why anybody would ever turn away, in her words, away from the church. Now, everyone there knows that I'm very nuanced, knows that I've taken a bit of a step back, but I'm still very engaged in some respects, but definitely do not believe in the way I've believed for 45, 50 years of my life, but that my beliefs have changed. And so and that's fine, because they're all okay with it. But then this one person in the room who was the only man in the room, and he was priesthood holder, and he just looked at me and he pointed at me and he said, because it's too hard for you to live it. And that actually really, really, I just sat there and I thought, why do I bother? And that was the impact it had on me immediately. I thought, please don't tell me this is too hard for me to live. I've done it for 50 odd years. I taught early morning seminary for 9 years at the same time as holding down a full-time job. I've been Relief Society president twice. Believe me, this is not too hard. It's just the things I believe have shifted and changed. But when his assumption was it's just too hard for you to live it, it really had that impact on that moment, in that instant of me thinking, not really sure why I bother. But then, as we do, we bounce back from these things, or some people don't, and that's the problem. But what we say, David is so right. The words we use are so important.
Weeks I've got a State Relief Society training session, and we're going to sort of cover that bit a bit. And so it's really interesting that as the church moves, and it does move, and I believe it's a church of revelation, so I accept the movement that happens. And sometimes I wish it would happen faster, but there you go. In Relief Society, or in a training meeting, or in priesthood, David, you might hear somebody say something, so refer to a policy or a doctrine that's outdated now, that the wordings we don't use anymore. Some things were really tough to listen to and hard. And we've become a bit softer with our words, even as a church organisation. But if somebody, particularly of the older generation, hasn't kept up with that change, it can be quite triggering, hurtful to hear that said in a classroom context. And so I'm very aware of that. So how do we push back on policies or doctrine, or even just wording that we don't actually believe anymore, but still give room for the statement maker to feel a part, that we don't totally shut them down? How do we kind of make that balance?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I'm not sure I have a perfect answer for it. It's not like there's a simple thing that one can say that allows the person who makes a comment that can be off-putting to other people, can push people out of the church, and help them feel like the church still belongs to them, but also to be able to put that statement in a context that allows other people to say, well, we really don't believe that anymore. We really, people can have a wide range of opinions on those kinds of things. I think it's situational. I think it depends upon you and your personality and how you want to handle that. I think it's worth the effort to try and handle that, and to be aware of the situation, and to try different things that works with the dynamic of the people in the group, and also your own personality. If you're the teacher, you can kind of stop the class and say, and level set and say, Brother Jones, it's often the brother that makes these kinds of statements. Brother Jones, I understand your position. I know that there's kind of a wide range of beliefs on that, and that the church doctrine and culture may be evolving away from that. And what I'd like to do is to have everyone who feels like that no longer applies to feel safe and feel like they can participate in the class. So, you try and make space for that diversity. But it's a little tricky, and it's a little situational. There is a tendency among some members to want to police the belief boundary of the church, and to always be able to say that they are a defender of the doctrine of the church. And if we have that tendency, I think we need to understand how that feels to someone who is maybe struggling with that doctrine. And defending the doctrine doesn't mean to re-articulate it. What we're really trying to do is to help people feel like they can participate at church, even if they don't believe that doctrine, or if that doctrine is outdated and they know that it's outdated. So I think it's a tricky situation, Debbie, and I think that would be a great discussion in a council. I think some of these kinds of issues, benefit in a local setting where you would get, 6 or 8 voices together to take that scenario and to be able to talk it through, and everyone would learn in the process, and then everyone would be able to be better in terms of responding to it when it occurs.
Do you mind if I jump in just for a moment? I've been thinking a lot about the imagery of building bridges, and um, a few days ago, I was speaking with a group of women who had been asking me. I've mentioned this before on the show many times, but my transgender youngest child, who is now our forever child, came originally to live with us because they weren't safe. Um, Here they were coming into, they were being warned by their family, um, parts of my family. This is a Mormon home. You're going to be rejected. They're going to try and convert you. They're going to try and marry you off, and this is going to be completely awful. And on in their first few nights here, because this is um, a Latter-day Saint home, you're going to see pictures, you're going to hear conversations. Doing a podcast, this is very current. Um, whether or not I hold nuanced beliefs or not, exposing this child to teachings from church, it might hurt. So one of the first things we did was to sit down with the For Strength of Youth book. Um, Here are some of the messages that you're going to hear at church. We don't necessarily believe this thing in our home, but you will hear it at church. Or this next page, this is another message that you may receive at church, that could potentially affect how they feel about their bodies, about how they interact just with themselves and being safe. And so we had to have those conversations, and to the point where today, some people are asking, why on earth would you expose your child to the possibility of this kind of pain? And thinking about it, the reason why they choose to come to church with me, they really like coming to church. It feels nice to them. They haven't had a community like that before. They are well received, they are treated with kindness. But I think the reason why they can cross that bridge, why they can step out, is because it feels safe. And the reason that bridge feels safe is because I am the person sitting next to them in the pew. I am the person that is the safe person. What I wonder about is people in church, and I think you're right. I think often it is priesthood holders who see it as part of their priesthood duty to defend the priesthood. I think it's something that's really important to them. Often it's safer to speak out in church against sin. If I were to say something that is very, very rigid and potentially hurtful, I'm going to be fairly safe when I do that. There will be nods of agreement, or potentially support. When I say something that may be in support of those who maybe have felt hurt, or some of the issues that are a bit more painful, um, that's where it gets tough. So I guess what I'm asking is, how can how can we make sure that church becomes a safer place to bring everything? So to bring my hurt, my anger, my humanity, my vulnerability, my difference in belief. How can we make sure that it doesn't become a clash at church and instead becomes a place where we all meet together in this shared common belief, which is Jesus?
I think there's a lot of variation between congregations, and different congregations have different feels, and so much of that comes from the leadership and the tone that they set. I think these are issues that really come fundamentally from that leadership and can be solved by that leadership. So if a ward or a stake wanted to address these issues, they would take these issues into their council meetings, and they would talk about these issues and say, how could we become that place? Then they could define the kind of talks they wanted to have at sacrament meeting, who gave those talks, what leaders they wanted to call, how they would handle the teaching of the members about that culture, and they would decide what they want to kind of create that way. When I was a stake president, I had 13 different wards and branches in my stake. Each one had a different flavor to them. And, the experience that people had in some of those congregations was very inclusive, and people would find a home there and would find connectedness. And other of those congregations were very judgmental, very strident, in a way that if you harbored any sort of disconnection with church beliefs, it would be hard to want to participate. So, you're trying to change a culture in a ward or in a branch, and it's not because of the doctrines of the church. It's just how people are behaving one with another. There's some wonderful church talks that talk about creating feelings of belonging, of creating community. And those church talks can be used to teach the principle. People can share where they, like you, Jane, are working to kind of create that culture, and what the way in which, how that feels to people on the margin, and how that helps them feel comfortable to be able to participate.
Debbie, do you have any more thoughts? What are you thinking? I'm just super aware that a lot
Yeah,
of
that
that was for leadership, and that's where you sit. Tell me what you're thinking.
I'm thinking it was beautiful. I'm also thinking about my ward, my stake, and the things that have helped me. That particularly the sisters, but everybody really. We always say this word being vulnerable now, don't we? So we know what it means, but we kind of dismiss it because it's a buzzword. But it really means people just putting it out there and just saying how it really is. And I'm lucky to be surrounded by women who are just honest about their lives. So I sort of told this story before, that when I've got 5 children, when they were in their early teens, I was reading and I looked up from my book, and Kevin, my husband, was playing a game, Scrabble or something, with 2 of them. One of them was reading, one of them was playing with toys, and the other one, I don't know what they were doing. But anyway, we were all this, like, what you would class as like a perfect scene, a perfect Mormon scene, this family all together. And as we've grown up and we've had people come into our lives, in-laws and stuff, they've enriched our lives, totally enriched our lives. Their differences have enriched our lives, changed it. Some of our family have stepped away from the church, and I find myself in a community where it's easy to say, yeah, this is what it's like for me. It's tough sometimes, and sometimes I can say honestly, there's joy in the messiness of this family. And I think it's really important, obviously, as you said, David, that as leaders we can model that. But it's nice to be just in a community generally who doesn't have to put on the airs and graces, that can just lay it out there, and then we allow each other to be human, just human, living our lives as best we can, and stopping this cultural perfectionism that I was brought up as an early married with. And as we get, I think as I've grown up, I'm thinking that was just so such an immature spiritualism or spiritual way of thinking, that everything has to be perfect to well, this perfection imagined, that actually in the messiness of our lives is where the joy is. And I can honestly say, with some of my kids who have stepped away from the church, well, all of them who've stepped away, I've learned such a lot. Like, I've grown as a person, and I can see, and I know this would be hard for some people to hear, especially people, you know, sort of who have been taught differently. But I can actually see growth in my children who have stepped away. And I take joy from that. I take joy in wherever I can take joy in, and you know, sharing that with our brothers and sisters, I felt really helpful, and them sharing their pain with me as well. It's been a real growing process that I've loved to a lot of extent.
Thank you, Debbie, for sharing that. I just want to add something. Not only is it important to kind of create this community in our ward where people feel like they belong, but even more important, it's to create that in our families. And there probably are some families where it all goes according to the beliefs I had when I was 20. I think I married when I was 22, and my wife was 20, and we thought it all was going to work out exactly in a particular way. And it hasn't. And I have 6 kids, and not all of them are kind of in the church, so to speak. And I, like you, have learned a lot from them. We have a saying in our house that there'll be no empty chairs at the dinner table. Sometimes that is used as a metaphor, no empty chairs in the temple. But we're not all going to be sitting in the temple, at least I don't think in this life. But we're all going to be wanting to sit around the dinner table. And we're all going to want to be able to have everyone around the table, even if they don't believe like I do. None of them do. You know, even the ones in the church don't believe like I do. We're all different. And we want to be able to create space for them to be different. There's an American psychologist named Brene Brown. I don't know if she has a following in the UK, but she has these 2 terms that she contrasts that I think are really important here. One is belonging, which means I am part of the group for who I really am. You know, this authenticity, this vulnerability. And then there's fitting in, which means I follow the rules and the norms of the group. And if we have in our family or in our ward a culture of belonging, then you get the authenticity that you described, Debbie, of being able to share who we really are, the struggles we have with our families, our lives, our faith, our whatever, and get the support from each other that we would never get if we didn't belong to a religious community. And we want to be able to create that so more people, even if they don't believe, even if they only believe 3 of the 40 things that they're supposed to believe, that they feel that they can be there because that belonging allows them a space and an emotional connection that's important. And the same in our families.
I like to jump in again with a to sort of build towards a question. I I really understand how easy it is, how tempting it is to be angry at people who leave. To it was just too hard for you to live the gospel. How often have I heard that? I have heard so often that it was somehow inevitable, that they weren't doing all of the right things that they should have been doing, and if they had, they would be here and they would be happy. Um, this part of me, this part of me that likes easy answers, I really want to hold on to that sometimes, except I know it isn't true. I know it isn't true. Um, I want to ask, because Debbie, what you had said had fascinated me too. What things have you learned from those people that you love who have stepped away from the church, or who have, or who believe differently? Um, I think about this isn't a conversation where I intend to get into anything that's remotely controversial. Um, to allude only to one thing, that um, I find stimulation and joy in complexity and question. It's a playground for me. I find it fascinating, and I love um, not having to have binary black and white decisions about, do I agree with this, or do I wish that hadn't happened, or whatever it might look like. I have felt very, very strongly since I returned to church activity after a lengthy period away around about 15 years ago, that no one can tell me what kind of member of the church I should be. No one should tell me what Mormonism is, because statistically in this area, people don't make it. People leave the church. There are so few of us. And if these things haven't worked for you over this lengthy period of time, if statistically you're going to fall away, then your answers might not work for me. So, what do I need to do, and how do I need to process these things? And for me, there was this ability um, to embrace and to be excited by and to feel frustrated at times, um, rather than just not think about it. The most exciting thing happened when all of the people that I was really close friends with, when they started to arrive in that space of they've heard something, or they've read something, or they're experiencing something where they are feeling like church is no longer home. And it lasted for such a long time for all of these people, it not being an overnight process, it being so painful, while others, and like I say, I really understand where it comes from, comfort ourselves with the idea that this extended, painful process is preventable, it's stoppable. If they would just do this thing, they would be fine. If they would work a little bit harder. Um, as these people that I love, my best friends, as they left, they're all gone now. And that's why we started the podcast. That's why we're doing this, because maybe talking would have helped, maybe having a place where you could really, really express how you felt and what those concerns were, so that we would better understand how to support. And I had hoped so much that being able to say, welcome into this space, you're almost, you're experiencing your faith in this vibrant and rich way, and it's hard, and I don't know how this is going to end for you, but you're here and it is wonderful, and I can talk to you like I've never been able to talk to you before. um to go from that excitement to now they're gone, and I mourn that. And they are still there, they are still my friends, but we don't have that connection because we don't see each other every Sunday anymore. we have to work harder at friendship because we're not just always in each other's path. So what I would like to know is, what have you learned from those who have went through a transition and it looks different now, and to follow that up by, how do we deal with the mourning that we feel? Should we be mourning? Is this a situation for mourning? Maybe Debbie, will you go first, and then David?
Yeah. So I've had a lot of conversations, tearful conversations with my children about this. And I ended up writing a poem because we do end up making each other cry, but only because we love each other so much. And I came, and she said to me, "Why do people feel it's a loss, Mum? Why is it a loss to them?" And we talked around the idea of fear of the eternities, fear of not being with your family, all the stuff that you're brought up with as a young married. But then for me, going through this experience has changed my faith. It's changed how I look at things. It's changed how I perceive a Heavenly Father. And the Heavenly Father I see might not be the Heavenly Father that other people need. Other people might need a more dictatorial Heavenly Father. But I need a soft, round, a hug Heavenly Father that it's all going to be all right and we're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Your kids are going to be fine. And I have to believe that. To survive in the church, I have to believe that. And I don't care what I hear in any general conference. I don't care what I hear in any talk. I have to believe, to survive in the church, I have to believe that it's all going to be all right. And that we're all going to be together. And that they're good people, and that's good enough, you know? And so I actually said to my daughter, "Look, I know you have to move. I know you have to go, but I have to stay. But you're crying." Sorry, my battery's going low. "You're crying about the pain you're causing me. And I'm crying because I feel I'm a loss. But I said, I will walk with you. I'll walk with you on your journey. I'll listen to your stories. I'll listen to your pain. I'll listen to everything you have to say. But please spend some time to sit with me in my mourning." Like, I'm mourning. This was in the early days. I don't mourn so much now because, as I said, my faith has changed. But I was mourning. So please sit with me, hold my hand, acknowledge my pain, and I'll walk with you. And that's how we've navigated it. And we only feel this pain is because there is so much love. And if we can all just keep an eye on the love, then we can manage this. We can all manage this.
I want to, before I come to David, just to speak to some of our favourite ladies in the world are in the comments here, who have transitioned away from the church. And so this part of me that I will unapologetically say, I hate it that you guys aren't in the church. You are my church. Right now, without changing, you are church. You are mine, and I claim you as mine. I don't care where you worship, how you worship, or how you don't worship. You are mine, and I love you. And if the church hurts you, then I will stand with you and I will bless every step of your journey. And there is no question, if the church is somewhere where you don't feel safe or it's not right in your life, you know what's right for you. It's my job to show up for you. I just want to make really clear, it sucks without you. We're better when you are here, but not at the expense of you. And so I just want to make really clear to those who are in the comments and whose insights we always value so much. Yeah, if this isn't right for you, we are here. But like Debbie's saying, I mourn that. I do mourn that. And that isn't your job to fix that. Because it would be a pretty sucky religion if I was just like, okay, see you later. They've gone. You really matter. You really, really matter. Yeah, so I'm just glad that we get this space. And if that's what it looks like, then I will take it. Okay, so sorry, Brother David, would you speak then a little bit about what you've learned from those who stepped back? And I'm going to extend the question again. We've talked a little bit about the pain, especially because in the UK, it is the church is so filled with this type of pain. We are seeing this everywhere. We have real fears around what the church is going to look like, not even just 5 years from now, but this time next year. Tell me what gives you hope.
Well, I guess what gives me hope is that God's plan is an eternal plan. It's not something that plays out in a year or 5 years, and he didn't kind of create this plan to save 100,000 or 1,000,000 people. He loves all of his kids, and however many hundreds of billions of people that is, he's always been playing the long game. There's always, maybe I kind of believe in the same God that Debbie believes, that it's not a God of gotchas. It's not a God of, well, you had that moment on July 23rd where you did this and you're out and I ignore you and I don't like you. The God that I believe in is the God that has made every possible opportunity for everyone to have all of the blessings that our heavenly parents want for them to have. So my hope is in the long game. I know that Western Europe, Britain, there's declining religion generally, and it's affecting the LDS Church just like it is all faiths. There's some unique issues, but there's probably kind of congregation consolidation and probably some degrowth that happens. These things are partly cultural, they're partly unique to the church. I hope we can learn from that and learn in the church what it takes to have people want to come together and strive to be better people and to support each other. So that's kind of my hope, is that we're going to be able to take these moments where it might be discouraging and in the kind of the crucible of our pain and wondering and questioning, can find better ways to have spirituality and religion be more relevant to more people. I think we lose something when we lose an ability to worship with, by and large strangers, people we would never meet, get to know them and their lives, share their burdens, find ways to learn from them and to support each other. And my worry in my own family is not the goodness of my children and the fact that they are going on good paths, but they've lost a community. It's not like they left the LDS Church and now we're in another church. They've left organized religion. And because of that, they've lost a setting where, I'm strangers with all of you, and yet I feel connected because we might believe different things about God, but we have these aspirations of being better people and creating a world full of love. And I think we're better because of that. And my fear is that we don't, my children, the ones that have disaffiliated, won't have that, even though they are great people and they have love for their fellow man and they care about goodness. And all those things that I want for them in their lives are good things. but I have that other worry. I do think that sometimes we trivialize faith. I think faith we sometimes equate to knowledge. I think it's okay to equate faith to struggle. And it's something that, maybe when I'm 65, which I am, I should have overcome, but I still struggle with things. I still wonder. I still search. I hope I still change. And I think sometimes we create a narrative that, you know, once you graduate from seminary, everything is fine with your faith, and you'll never have to re-examine anything. But that's not life. Life is far more complex than that. And I think one of the things I've learned from my children is how they can see things in such a different way than the way that I see things, and how much I can learn from them if I'm open to seeing things through a different generational lens or through a different lens of personality. And I'm blessed when that happens.
David, there's a couple of questions that is it all right to say to James, you want to step in? So there's a couple of questions that I came from what you were saying, and it reminded me actually of a friend of mine who left quite a long time ago. But he said he was having difficulty with church history and the things that came out more when the internet was introduced to ordinary people. And he went to his leaders, and the stake president didn't seem to be able to help him. The bishop didn't seem to be helping him. Nobody seemed to be able to help him. And what he said was, I just want a bone. Can somebody just throw me a bone? And I know over the course of my faith journey, I realised that we have to find our own bones, because everybody's sort of faith crisis or trust crisis is so different that we have to find our own bones. But in your book, you said that avoiding difficult subjects is no longer an option. And I do feel, though, that we were ignorant of even knowing what he was talking about. We couldn't even give him a bone, even if we had one, because we didn't know what he was talking about. And I'm just wondering, do you think that to support each other through a crisis, does that mean that we should be prepared to study difficult or uncomfortable things?
I think it depends on the person. I've chosen to study them. I don't find a way that I can relate to people I care about without entering their world, and that means that I need to be immersed in the issues that they are concerned about. You can guess what those issues are. They haven't really changed in the last 5 or 10 years. Sometimes we think they have to have answers. Sometimes we think we have to be able to find resolutions to those. I think, one of the challenges, again, we have with faith is that we think that faith means to know, and it doesn't. So I'm comfortable entertaining that I will never know the answer to a certain set of hard questions, and that they won't resolve in my lifetime. I'm comfortable that there's humanness in the church. I'm comfortable that just because one gets called to a particular position doesn't mean that their brain doesn't operate in human ways with bias and blind spots and cultural clouds. I'm comfortable that we still see through a glass darkly, and that we don't really get to a point where it's not truly faith. So some people, maybe that doesn't work for. But for me, that's a place I needed to go to be able to write the book that in some ways really rejects the narrative that people leave because it's too hard or because they've been offended or they just wanted to sin or be lazy or something like that. Because in my experience with people who've been sincerely committed to the church, their leaving the church usually comes from a place of great pain and challenge, trying to reconcile things that they can't find answers for, and often not finding a place in the church to be able to live while they struggle with those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of answered my second question, actually, because we hear a lot that doubt is the opposite of faith. And then there's the other view that doubt is not the opposite of faith, but the opposite of certainty. And I suppose that's where I come from. I kind of call myself a seeker because I don't always find the answers. Well, very rarely do I find the answers, but I actually do enjoy looking at the questions and just going where it takes me. So do you think that, so you've probably answered that. Do you think that doubt is sometimes useful to work through and is kind of essential to our growth?
I think being honest with where we are is essential to our growth. So, if we have doubt and we don't fully believe and we're concerned about a particular doctrine or historic issue, if we just pretend that it's not an issue, I'm not sure that that's helpful. That doesn't mean that we have to resolve it today or tomorrow. It doesn't mean that we can't live with it for the rest of our life. But just to pretend that that something isn't what it is to you, I don't think is a helpful place to be.
I've only got one more question.
Yeah, I was going to just ask Debbie, do you have anything
Yeah,
else?
do you want to say something?
No, I am just enjoying
I just wanted to say, is there anything that you didn't put in your book that you wish you'd put in there, that you'd learn after?
So I added to my book last year. I don't know if you have the second edition or the first edition. You probably have the first edition. So the second edition has one more chapter in it, and it's called Ministering in Our Families. And it recognizes an omission that I had. I did not talk about the dimensions of mixed faith families and how challenging those are. So when a husband comes to a wife and says, "Sweetheart, I no longer believe," what does that do to a marriage? When a child says, "Mom and Dad, I can't go to church anymore. I don't believe in the teachings of the church," what does that do to a family? And so that last chapter really I wrote because it's a glaring omission. I had navigated that in my own life, so it wasn't a point of pain. And my wife and I have similar religious views, so we don't have a mixed faith marriage. But as I talked with particularly mothers, but also fathers, there can be a tremendous amount of pain when a child says, "I don't believe in the teachings of the church anymore." They can feel shame, failure. They can feel fear for their adult child, their 40-year-old child's, decision making and eternal welfare. And the depth of suffering that happens, marriages whose only foundation was common religious belief, when it is no longer common, what does it mean? How do you find connection when you no longer believe in the teachings of the church, when so much of your eternal marriage identity was based on that? So I added that as a chapter and apologized to the many mixed faith couples in particular that read the book and said, what about the pain that we are experiencing in our marriage?
Can I jump to Sarah? Do you have any questions?
Sorry,
Sorry,
I was
Deb.
just going to say I'm going to shut up now, Jane.
No, don't you dare. Sarah, do you have any questions or any thoughts as we move towards closing out that you'd like to either ask David or that you'd like to share?
No, I think it's been really fascinating and interesting listening to some of the things that we need to do better, some of the things that we need to get much better at. And I was mindful as we've been talking, a conversation I had a little while ago with my stake president, and we have a great relationship. We talk very frequently. And he said to me this one time, not long ago, he said, "What's your relationship like with the church?" And I said, "I love this church. It drives me to complete and utter insanity. And sometimes I said, I want to scream. But I said, maybe there's hope, but we need to get far better at things moving forward and things being better than they are." And then I said, it's a vehicle for me to exercise my relationship with Christ. I said, even though the church drives me to utter insanity, and it does. But I've loved hearing you say tonight, David, about the importance of us being able to give people the message, even if people belong differently, the church belongs to us. Because sometimes there can be, when you're a little bit on the kind of margins or a little bit on the outside edge of the inside, there can really sometimes come across a bit of a strong message. Well, why do you still come to church if you're not happy with everything? Why don't you go away and just leave the church alone? I'm thinking, because it's my church, because it's my church. It belongs to me as much as it does everybody else. And I think it's a good message. Even if we believe differently, it's our church. And I think one of the things that we probably need to help our ward families do and do better is understand what you said, David, that really struck me, that we need to find a way for people to participate, even if they or us or we don't believe a particular doctrine. Even if there's something we don't believe, there's something we reject, there's something we no longer choose to live because we don't feel it useful or helpful to our lives, how do we help people still find a place in church for them? And I think that's something that we need to be so much better at doing.
And I would extend that to ask, what about if people if their faith looks different to the extent where they have rejected absolutely everything that a traditional Latter-day Saint person of faith would look like. Can we have atheists sitting beside us in the pew because they're finding something of value in the church? Can we have people who have we've heard some of the women in the comments expressing pain about church teachings. Can we have people who reject either what a church teaching is or how it has been taught? Can we have people who are able to be in that space together that we might find in other religions, we might find in other faith spaces where there isn't that rigidity of expectation, where you can quite happily reject everything? Could we see secular Latter-day Saints? I don't know, but I mean, it would be a fascinating thing, to sort of think about. I guess I wonder most of all how strong would a bridge have to be able to say to someone, wherever you are at, this is going to be strong enough that I am going to be strong enough to hold you in this space. That fascinates me. Do you have any closing questions or comments, Debbie? I'd love to know what you're thinking about tonight.
No, I think I've said enough, and it's been a real pleasure to listen to David's thoughts. And as I said earlier, my journey at the moment is just about soaking stuff up and listening and learning. And so I'm really grateful for for all your words and the
Do you mind
experiences
me
that you
asking?
shared. So thank
Could I just quickly ask you, because now it was either last year or the year before, you had one of the things that you had, you talked about some of the firesides you had helped organise. You had asked David to speak in a UK fireside, which was incredibly interesting. What was your aim? What do you think the UK could benefit from hearing?
you. Are you talking to me, Jane?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't actually organise it. That's what David was the one that organised it, and he set it
Right.
up. I just did some advertising. It was just really, it's really important, you know, that ordinary members get to speak to somebody who has a particular interest, and I would say an expertise on you know, has done some studying and can just be honest in their questions. And I think that's what happened that night, is that some people were able to say, you know, this is what it's like for me. I'm feeling this. David didn't have all the answer, but this is the thing, you know, about it's in the discussion, it's in the listening to the stories and discussing them. That's where the peace comes from. That's where the knowledge comes from. Not actually always having the answers, but just I was reading a book. I forgot what the book was the other day, but it was about this woman who her daughter turned to drugs. So you get the history of her finding drugs and getting quite into taking them. And the mother was whisked off to a retreat, a Native American retreat, where they sit in a, a, a tent and there's hot stones and they just talk. And there was healing in that talking. And for me personally, I felt that there was healing in them asking the questions and sitting with like-minded people. And that's my hope really for Relief Society, that we are sisters sitting in a circle and being safe in our place and just talking and finding healing in the talk. And I think that's what David did to the group and what I would love for Relief Society.
Thank you so much. Do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with us, David?
Well, I started off with talking about this scripture where people gathered around the waters of Mormon and made promises to mourn with each other and comfort each other. And Debbie has a number of times alluded to the power of love and how important love is on this. And independent of what we believe and whether we all believe the same, I know there's some that, think I'm foolish for staying in the church. But if we can be committed to each other on a deeply covenantal, promise oriented way, where we care about people, not because of what they believe, but because they are human, because they're children of God, because they're our neighbors. And it doesn't matter whether they believe this or that or agree with me or not. We create a better world. We create a better family. We create a better church congregation. And so I find that scripture so meaningful to me. And it's not something I'm always good at. Again, it's a skill, it's a talent, it's a characteristic. And it's not common in American culture. I don't know how common it is in British culture, but if we can truly embrace what it means to love our neighbors, and to be into their hearts and to mourn with them and minister in the purest sense of the word, not some sort of programmatic way, but understanding people's needs, because we understand them, then we are a better world, a better people, and better families. So that's, to me, what bridge building is all about. And I have a long way to go, but I'm trying.
Thank you so much. Um, I spoke with our Sarah earlier on this week about one of the things that I had learned over Easter, um, or I had been thinking about over Easter. When Jesus spent his time in the garden and this sacred moment is happening, the sacred moment is happening. Um, I think often we think a lot about the fact that it's Jesus and the fact that it's the atonement that's taking place. Were we to just be human about that, if a man, if a woman, if one of our siblings in this world says to us, "Will you stay awake with me?" And we can't do that because we are being human and we are tired and there's so many other things that take our attention. I wonder what it was that he needed in that moment. Did he need someone just to see him, just to see his pain, just to be with him in that moment? Just, will you not look away? I think so often about those moments when we need to be awake and we've missed it because we've been asleep. Or our church has frequently called us to be awake. Our scriptures call us to awake and arise. And sometimes we forget that that can be such a simple thing, just seeing someone and not projecting, not telling someone how to do the atonement better. Or if you just read a few more scriptures, Jesus might have found that garden experience an awful lot more easy. But just to be while the person goes through what they're going through. I think about the people who we meet every week in the comments who bring their pain and their honesty and their vulnerability. I think about the stories that have been shared with us that are sacred and that we hold as sacred as the scriptures that we have been given. The fact that you bring that into this space is incredible to us. Wherever you are at in your journey, you are welcome and you are loved, and this is why we're here. This is what faith looks like, even when it could look as polar opposite as it can be on the outside. I'm a part member family. My husband has never had the kind of faith I have, and yet we love each other and we meet in this space of love. I want especially to just extend my thankfulness to someone like Sarah, who has spent her whole life fighting and pushing and obeying, and who can still be told that she's not working hard enough or that she isn't the right kind. This is my sister. I
Not
think
the right kind of moment.
for some, for one anyway, but definitely not for me. Definitely not for us. I think about my sister Debbie, who we talk about how things should be talked about in councils. For a woman to do that and to push sometimes the way that we have to push, or to open our voice and to fight sometimes, yeah, alongside ministering. That is the kind of sister I am inspired by. A sister who gets tired and feels alone and will push and will stand with those who are vulnerable. But I think about the gift that you've given us tonight, Brother David, and the gift that you've been giving us for such a long time between the book and your ministry, especially the ministry that's touched us here in the UK, which has been so honest, and it's not been cookie cutter. Here are the answers. to not be given answers it's one of my favorite things. Please don't try and fix me. While I do the work on me, hold my hand, minister, and tell me about Jesus. Tell me the things that are going to strengthen me in this space. And I feel like that's what you do beautifully. Wherever your journey takes you, as the sisters who are gathered here tonight, one thing that we really appreciate being able to do is to bless the journeys of those who minister to us. And wherever your journey takes you, as you continue to work both in your family and in the church, we bless every step, Brother David, and we just want to say how much we love you, and we are so thankful to you for tonight. And let's hopefully do this again sometime, because it's been wonderful. With that, for our audience, I think we're going to be back here this Sunday night for Safeguarding Sunday, where we have a few very specific things we would like to talk about. And apparently next week, the gang are going to be asking me some questions, which is weird because people never ask me questions. Everyone gives me such an easy pass. So I'm waiting to see where this goes. I am really looking forward to being able to join with you all again next week. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Easter season. As always, if you want to reach out to any of the gang here, you know where we are. If you have any questions, maybe David, there's been some great chat happening in the comments tonight. You're always invited to go and check them out. We love you, we appreciate you, and we will see you again next week. Good night, everyone.
Night, everyone.